In this video, we're going to talk about sprayer-specific setup for the Pro1200. So in the top menu, we're going to hit this icon here. It looks like we call it Tiles or Toolbox menu. And in there, we can see, starting on the top left, we have our system. And you'll notice 5.16 in there. That is the most current version of software. So you can tell quick and easy what software version you have in your monitor just by looking there. If we go into system, this is kind of a repeat of what we've shown in the first video, but we have our date and time, camera functions, display setup for brightness, night brightness, volume, and units. If we go into the data menu, inside of the data menu, data management is where we could go and delete grower farm field tasks. Now, because we're not using this monitor as a task controller, that won't have anything in it. Inbox is where if we sent a file to this display, whether it be, again, if we were using this for application or on a tractor or a combine, we could send grower farm field data to here from desktop software. Import is what we use to import those files that were sent over the cloud or files that were put on a thumb drive. So we could select our import source and pull in various files, field files or things like that. Export is where we would output things. So we could output our user profile and run screens or our vehicle configurations. This is handy for us when we want to do a clean install. We can export out what you have set up first, do a clean install, and then put that information back in. Coming over to the center, sprayer, the sprayer card. This is where we can go in and do sprayer-specific setup. So our make and model is set up here. If we go to the next tab on the right, that's liquid management. So this is a quick access to boom air purge if we want to blow out the boom. Front fill reclaim to reclaim the water out of the front fill pipe and push it into the tank. Don't do that when your tank is completely full, as there's no room for it. Next button down is our heater control. So we have different ways to do the heat. One is reaching up to the headliner. The other is right here on the display, easy at your fingertips. We also have the option of programming 2 memory switches for the lights. So on the overhead console, there's a light 1, light 2 button, and we can program what each of those buttons do. So if we highlight certain lights and we push and hold memory 1, do you want to save this current? We hit yes, and that is now memory 1. So if we turn on memory 1, all of our lights are on. Memory 2 shuts those off. So you can have 2 different light configurations, maybe one for road, one for field, or something like that. Configurable controls on the right-hand side. There are 4 buttons on your right-hand console, just to the right of the propulsion handle, numbered 1 through 4. And we can program those to whatever we want to do. So we usually try to set them up with number 1 as sparge pressure decrease, number 2 as sparge pressure increase, number 3 is a manual reversing fan cycle, and number 4 is most likely going to be blank, but you can pick something you want in there. You can have it said there that was set to turn on the beacons. You could turn on memory lights 1. We can do volume. We can mute the radio in case someone's phoning us. We can answer the cell phone. Front fill reclaim. So there's lots of different things that you can program in there to do. Temperature, things like that. So you can pick what you want to program in there. If we go to this transmission icon, this is where we set up the quick shuttle speed. So on our propulsion handle, underneath to the right of the rotary speed dial, there's a black button with like a U-turn symbol on it. That is what we call our quick shuttle. So if we're driving across the yard, and we click that button, it's going to stop the sprayer and switch directions and start backing up. We click it again, it'll stop and it'll go forward. This can be handy when backing into corners or moving around the yard, but we can set what speeds we want it to go into when we click that button. So it's default at 5 mile an hour forward, 3 mile an hour reverse, but you could go 20 forward, 10 reverse. I don't know why you would do that. That would be scary, but this speed's decent. Some people like to go a little slower, maybe a little bit faster. The next icon down is the reversing fan. Most of these come defaulted as disabled. So the only way to reverse the fan would be to hit that manual button that we had talked about previously and do a manual cycle of it. So by going in here, we can hit enable, and now we have the ability to adjust the time interval and how long it runs for when it does kick in. So default 25 minutes. Every 25 minutes it'll run for 15 seconds, and you can customize those. Steering tab just tells us whether we're in road mode or field mode, and it changes how the steering wheel responds for basically how quick you move it to how the wheels react for different situations. Back in our cards menu under applicator, because we are not using this monitor to apply, it's set up to none and doesn't do us anything. Sprayer applicator configuration. In here, we have our speed source priority. Now, normally we want GPS speed as our first priority and wheel speed as our backup. Sometimes if we lose GPS, that might actually reverse. So occasionally you might want to go in there and check that, and by tapping on the 3 bars, we can set which one is the priority. So we want GNSS on top. Now, when we go down into the GPS card, start off with our receiver serial number, that it's installed. This unit's running the Vector Pro on the roof. And this is where we tell it whether we're going to run WAS, which isn't going to be very accurate. Don't recommend running on WAS. But as a backup, it might be okay to use. AFS corrections would be your next option. So you could have a subscription for AFS 1, 2, or 3. Now, if you have it set on AFS 3, you would have to have this turned on. It would tell you your expiry date. And I'd recommend leaving the correction satellite on auto, because AFS corrections will look at 3 different satellites and pick which one's the best. The other option to run is RTK. Now, this unit is set up to RTK. You can see we have a check mark by our correction source. We are set up to the RTK Plus G4 profile. So our server address, port number 2191, mount point PRS RTCM 3-G4. That is the best setting for RTK units. If you have any questions on that, please give one of our specialists a call and we can explain how to set that up properly. GNSS accuracy setup. So this will show how accurate we are. Now, currently I'm sitting about 8.9 inches. I have not moved since I've turned the key on, and I'm tucked in beside a building. So it hasn't locked into our 1-inch RTK yet. Now, on default, these guys are set quite low, the accuracy thresholds. So basically when we get to, I think they come at 3-inch and 5-inch. So at 3 inches, it gives us a warning that our accuracy isn't good. At 5 inches, it cuts us out and defaults us to our backup, which is WAS usually. And WAS is not very accurate at all. So last year in our solar flares, we had issues where RTK Plus was cutting out. And on some software versions, it allowed us to bump these up. So if we had these up at like 12 and 10, it would give us a warning at 10 inches, but wouldn't actually cut out the RTK to 12-inch accuracy. Now, 12 inches isn't very good for RTK, but if it cuts out at 5 inches and goes to WAS, you're probably like 30-some inch accuracy. So 12 inches RTK in a bad solar flare is better to run at that than 30-inch WAS. So this might help deal with some of the solar flare problems we had with RTK last year. Down the right side, we have some AccuGuide settings. Those should be fine from default, vehicle measurements, and some steering calibrations. So this unit has not yet had a roll calibration done. So calibrations need to be done through the case monitor, this Pro1200, and then through the Raven system for the SC1. So there's 2 sets of calibrations to do. Now, when we go into our run screens, our left area shows our sparge pump status on or off, our NCV duty cycles, boom height, auto boom status, auto boom switch. We can also scroll down and see what's happening down there. Our run 1 is going to be our universal terminal or our Raven screens. And then we have our other screens that have various setups, cameras, and sprayer information on them.